So my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am. My skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course, the tinfoil hat guy's gonna see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
One of it is used to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking for military-type people, because in the military...
Welcome to UFO Classified, everyone. I'm your host, Erica Lukes. Happy to be here on a beautiful and really hot Friday evening in Utah. But I will tell you, good things are happening, and I am working behind the scenes with a couple of my friends in the subject, and we are going to be bringing you a new show with video. It's going to be incredible because I have been working hard on that, as other people have that I have teamed up with. So anyway, Scott, you know who I'm talking about. Mario, you know who I'm talking about. This is going to be cool. And not only are we going to have great video interviews, but I also have incredible documents to show all of you, and this is going to be cool. I look forward to kind of bringing it on. So game is on, my friends. I want to just give a shout out to Bill and Mario, Scott, everybody in chat, the people that support the show. And you can support the show. You can go to Patreon to find me, Erica Lukes UFO Classified, or ufoclassified.com to support not only my show, but the archiving process, which is so important. As all of you know, I have spent years and a considerable amount of money to collect archives from researchers who've contributed a great deal to the subject. I have them in a wonderful location where others can come and learn and study, and I plan to continue my archiving process to make sure that things are preserved for future generations. And let's just hope to God they actually learn something from some of this. That would be the seventh sign of the apocalypse. But anyway, those younger kids, I'm telling you. So tonight I am joined by Tim Swartz, and he is gone through quite a time as of late because one of his dear friend, somebody that he talked to every day for 30 years, passed away, and Timothy Beckley was a force to be reckoned with. He had a life like no other. He passed away at the young age of 73 in Manhattan. He passed away Monday, May 31st. He was born in New Brunswick, New Jersey. He was known as Mr. UFO and Mr. Creepo, a pioneer in the field of ufology, the paranormal, and all things bizarre. I was so lucky to have had the opportunity to talk with him many times. I wish I could have sat down at a bar, had a glass of wine, and talked about all the crazy experiences, not only with some of his other side gigs. And Tim, I've got to just say, your friend had quite the life, didn't he?
Yeah, that's put it lightly there, Erica. And I need to say that I enjoy the way that before the show actually started, we're having a conversation, just talking normally and everything, and then when the show started, and you opened your mic. You're all professional. Hi, this is Erica Luke, and you're listening to...
Well, it only lasts for 5 seconds, trust me. And half the time the mic isn't unmuted, and oh, my Lord, it's a debacle. But thank you. Thank you for the props.
Oh, well, I mean, I do the same thing. I mean, Tim Beckley and we had our show Exploring the Bizarre, and my conversational voice is somewhat different than when I would do Exploring the Bizarre, because the same way it would come on and be like, hi, this is Tim Swartz on Exploring the Bizarre. Be sure to tune in Sunday. Sunday.
Well, that was such a great show, and I was honored to be on it a couple times, and you guys had such a great chemistry. So I'm sure that I can't even imagine how hard this is for you, and I'm very, very sorry.
Well, yeah, Tim Beckley, I mean, not only was he my my publisher. You know, he was the one that with his company, Inner Light Publications and Global Communications, published all of my books. But then I also helped Tim publish his books, other people's books, things like that. So, I mean, it was just not only we were friends, but we were business partners. And, he was the type of guy that, he would always keep me jumping. I mean, he would call me practically every day with something. He constantly had these ideas flowing for his next project. I mean, we would be in the middle of one book, and then he'd be saying, after we're done with this book, I've got this idea. Let's do this, and let's start collecting material for this, that sort of thing. And so now that he has passed, I keep expecting him to call me. Well,
if anybody could, it would be him.
It would be. I mean, from the hereafter, or if he's, if he made it to the mothership, I do. I expect him to call me, and say, okay, this is just a temporary slowdown. Here's what we're going to do next, and then continue on.
That it's so hard when you have somebody, like you said, that you're talking to every day, and it's like you have this creative exchange with them, and you're, bouncing ideas off of each other, and so it's just, I am very, very sorry, but I can't even imagine the wonderful friendship and the excitement. Good Lord, on he was just so colorful. I don't think I've ever met a human being that was that colorful. I mean, it was like he was going to, show it and be flamboyant, and that was his shtick, and he loved it, and he did it with, so much pizzazz.
Well, Nancy Burns, publisher of UFO magazine, she said that Tim Beckley was the Hunter S. Thompson of ufology. And yes, that she's absolutely right. That just sums up Tim perfectly.
It absolutely does. I mean, I like that description. And so I wanted to ask you, just for people, because I have a lot of new listeners that are learning about the subject, and just give us a little bit of your background, and then tell us when you first met your dear friend.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was like a lot of people who are in this. It started for me at a fairly young age, though not like most other people. I really wasn't interested in UFOs or things like that. I was born, raised in Indiana, so I was more interested in racing cars, basketball, that sort of thing. And one time, I think it was around third grade. At that time, we would get a little newspaper from the Scholastic Book Service, and it would come out once a week. It was sent to classrooms all around the country, and it was an aggregate of the world's top headlines. Well, our teacher would take the articles from the paper and assign everybody to write an essay about it, and then you'd have to present it in front of the class. One time I got a story about UFOs. I'd heard of UFOs, but really hadn't paid that much attention. So, I wrote up probably this, crappy little, essay and presented it in front of the class. And I thought, that would be the end of it. No, I was then dubbed for the rest of my, up through high school. I was the flying saucer guy. I was the guy who believed in, little green men from Mars and, and all that stuff. Kids, they always have to try to find. We could have been
friends in school. That would have been cute.
Kids, they always try to find something, on you so that they can tease you about. I mean, that's just the way kids are. Okay. But what really got me interested then in the subject was that, you know, while there was a group around, you know, everybody would make fun of you, but then some people would come back later by themselves and say, you know, I don't believe in this stuff, but, and then they'd proceed to tell me, you know, while their family was on vacation, they saw a UFO, or you know, they saw their great grandmother appear at the foot of their bed after she had died a week previously. It was stories like that that really started to draw me in, because these people would come to me and very sincerely tell me these stories, you know, because back then there wasn't the proliferation of reality television shows about UFOs and ghosts and Bigfoot that we have now.
Oh, and they're also good, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, I have to admit, I mean, you know, there are some that I watched that I really enjoy, and then there are others I watched just to laugh at.
Yeah, hear you on that one.
So, so for a lot of people that have an unusual experience, first of all, they are loath to tell anybody else what happened to them, because you know you can't tell anybody that you work with because you'll be made fun of. You can't tell anybody in your family; they're even worse than the people that you work with. And for a lot of people, you know, we have our daily activities. You know, you get up, have a cup of coffee, drive to work, come home, next day do it all over again. Okay, you have this routine. You know what's going to happen in your life. All these activities, there's a filing system in your head that you put them away. But, you know, you file them away. So say one day you're driving to work and all of a sudden this giant disc lands in front of you and little gray guys come out, collect some rocks and plants, jump back in and fly away.
Well, that would do it.
Where do you put that? Where do you put that in your brain? All right. So, and for a lot of people, that just bugs the heck out of them, because there is no reference to something like that. A lot of people think they're, you know, okay, I'm crazy. That's just it. You know, I've lost it. And so it eats away at them, especially if they can't tell anybody about it. So people would come to me, you know, and knowing that I would listen to them. And I think a lot of people, you know, they just want to be listened to. They just want to have that assurance that they're not crazy.
Right.
You know, and I often say that I've seen these people, you know, they'll tell their story. You know, I'll tell them, yeah, you know, there's been a lot of other people who've had very similar experiences. So yeah, I believe that you know that you had a real experience, and no, you're not crazy. And you could just see the weight lifted from their shoulders, and they walk away. And you know, they may never tell anybody else again about what happened to them, but it doesn't matter. You know, they got that reassurance that they're not insane, that you know that they haven't gone over the edge and are seeing little green men or you know ghosts jumping around their house or things like that. And that's really what attracted me to all of this, is that human aspect of these experiences.
Yep, I agree.
You know, because most of these people, they're not interested in getting publicity or making money or anything like that. You know, it's just the opposite for most. You know, they don't even want to think about it. A lot of people, they come up with these really elaborate mental ruses on what they thought they saw was something else. You know, kind of like this, like a reverse Occam razors,
right,
you know, so to speak. You know, so yeah, and that's always kind of been my philosophy then when dealing with people and doing my investigations. Is first of all, you know, I mean the event is interesting. I want the details, but then I want that I want your human element to it. I want to know how you felt about it, what you think was going on. Not, you know, I mean, yeah, sure, you know, what you saw is important, but what do you think was happening to you. How did you feel afterwards? Did you try to tell anybody about it? Did anything unusual happen before your initial experience, and did anything unusual experience happen after your first experience? It's those parts of the story that I think are really important, that a lot of times end up getting glossed over for just the facts, ma'am. Light in the sky, 5:30, in the afternoon, flew overhead. That's it. But there's so much more to these experiences that really need to be collected and analyzed, for want of a better term.
Right. And I think, you hit it on the head, because for me, when I'm talking to people, or just hearing personal experiences, and just they know that, okay, well, obviously this lady teaches Pilates and she's talking about UFOs and, different things. It's like, it's just funny to hear people that would never have ever, the courage to talk about things, how they can open up, and whether they've had, a potential experience with, a deceased loved one, or something, something that was out of the ordinary for them. It is very fascinating to hear people's tales, and then to also just give them a safe space to talk about it. And I want to ask you, since you brought this up, this has been something that has been on my mind as of late, but I see in the UFO world how sometimes, you have these experiences like I did, and then I turned to the UFO world, and you can get some pretty whacked out cats out there that are trying to tell you that your experience was, you were visited by a seventh dimensional feline being from Pluto, and all of this stuff. And it's, when you're in a vulnerable situation, when you've had something happen that is kind of shocking your world, it's to have people like that are telling you what you experienced has been a little bit alarming. I mean, what do you think? Because you've talked to people for many years, and you've seen the UFO world.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that I always emphasize when I'm talking to people is that with all of this, UFOs, ghostly experiences, cryptid creatures, things like that, is that you have to approach them that, okay, you had a real experience, but as for explanations, I'm not going to give you any, because I have no idea. And you can develop your own ideas and belief systems, I suppose, about what's going on. But I always like to emphasize, when people ask me, do you believe in UFOs? Well, first of all, I said, that's the wrong question to be asking. And it's a loaded question as well. And I tell people, I said, I don't believe in anything. I don't believe in UFOs. I don't believe in ghosts. I try not to have a belief system established with any of this stuff. I may have some pet theories, mind games that I like to play with myself and what's going on. But ultimately, we have no idea what any of this is and what is going on. And if you develop a belief system, say like the extraterrestrial hypothesis, UFOs are nuts and bolts spaceships from other planets, that's it. Well, see, you've gone and cemented your brain into that one belief system, and if any contradictory evidence comes your way, you're going to automatically reject it because it doesn't fit within that belief system that you have established within yourself. So that's why I tell people, you don't want to put yourself down that path in believing one thing or another. You have to keep your mind open, because there could be lots of other things going on that we have no idea. I mean, sure, and that's one of the things right now that I'm finding especially annoying with the whole resurgence of interest in the UFO phenomena with the mainstream press is it's either extraterrestrial spaceships or it's man-made black budget secret projects or they're hoaxes. You know, it's there's no in between. It's one or the other, and it's like, okay, for at least 75 years, there have been all kinds of absolutely incredible sightings and experiences that, you know, people like us have been recording and investigating, and still we can't get people out of this mindset that we're dealing strictly with extraterrestrials, man-made crafts, or hoaxes. And so, you know, that's why I tell people, you know, you have to look at all of the evidence that is being presented to you, and don't have a mindset because there could be something important that comes up in that evidence, and you're just going to go and toss it away, and then, you know, there'll be another, there'll be another 20 years of not knowing what's going on because some important clue you tossed it out because it didn't fit your favorite theory on, you know, whatever it is you're dealing with.
Yeah. And so I have to ask you, I mean, because I believe that we really over the decades have been conditioned to believe that this is, you know, ET, that this is, if it looks like this, you know, and so, or, you know, this, I mean, the same could be said for not believing in something, you know, extraordinary. But I mean, you know, when you see, you know, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, ET, you know, Independence Day, all of these things that have been put forward into our culture, I mean, they really have, or the X-Files, I mean, they shaped our belief systems. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, how I can, you know, I mean, now we've got this whole, you know, a whole new generation of people that are just jumping right to that instead of stepping back and saying, okay, wait a minute, just because 5 people that are working, you know, with this faction are telling us this is what it is, that doesn't necessarily mean it is. And so I think that you've really, you know, I think you've made some great points. Thank you.
Well, and there has been a, you know, whether intentional or not, there has been a conditioning system, I think, in place for quite a while to soften us up, maybe, to the idea that there could be extraterrestrial life that not only is visiting us now, but it's probably been here as long as we've been on this planet. You look at popular movies, television, pop culture in general is very oriented towards the extraterrestrial hypothesis of UFOs. What used to be Saturday morning cartoons, lots and lots of shows that dealt with you know, friendly aliens visiting us from other planets. So now you have you know, a number of generations who have been brought up to at least subconsciously accept the idea that we are not alone in this universe. There was a good story that I heard one time where a family was walking home from a party one evening, just, you know, walking down the streets, mother, father, a couple of teenagers, and all of a sudden, a very brightly lit UFO flew overhead and hovered over the street for a little while, and the adults were just flabbergasted, and the teenagers, you know, had their cell phones, barely looked up and acknowledged what was going on. Afterwards, they were asked, weren't you shocked? I mean, there was like a UFO flying overhead, and they were like, what? It was a spaceship. I mean, we know there are spaceships from other planets, right? And that was their attitude to this. While the adults, who had been brought up differently, were just gobsmacked by what they were seeing. So I think that we're kind of reached a point where if disclosure does come about, if at least some aspect of the UFO phenomena, does represent extraterrestrials visiting us, that we're not going to see the mass panic that was predicted back in the 50s and 60s on the revelation that we're not alone in the universe. And instead, you're going to get, at least with the younger generations, this kind of acceptance that this was something we knew about a long time ago.
Right. Yeah, it's also fascinating. And I want to go back to, okay, so you reached out to people. You were having, you're talking and collecting information and making people feel comfortable. And so what did your family say about your newfound passion in the UFO world?
I think that for the most part, my family just accepted it because that was me. I was kind of a weird kid.
Nerds unite. That's us.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I after that point, I did develop an interest in reading science fiction, watching horror movies, things like that. I became very very into movies and televisions and things like that, and that actually is what ended up leading to my career in television, because I was fascinated by the whole production process, special effects, things like that, how movies, television shows were filmed, and so I mean that's. When I went into college, I ended up taking a journalism and television production, and then all of my jobs on the other side of my UFO and paranormal research always was in television, video production, journalism, that sort of thing. And in fact, it was because of that I had my first meeting with Timothy Green Beckley. And surprisingly enough, when I was younger, I was still probably in middle school. One of the first UFO books that I bought from the late Gray Barker's Saucerian Press, who was out of West Virginia. And I bought a book called, what was it called? It was like, the Underground Mysteries, Shaver, Darrow's, something along those lines. And it wasn't until years later that I happened to notice that the author was Timothy Green Beckley. So like one of the first books that I bought on this weird stuff was by Tim Beckley. So, I mean, all the way back when I was in middle school, there was this connection that I had with Tim Beckley. But
that's incredible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and Gray Barker was Beckley's first publisher, and got him, kind of taught Tim how to publish, how to write books, how to get them published, how to push them, how publicize them, that sort of thing. Gray was a film distributor for the West Virginia area. And so he knew all about how to push movies, especially, like for drive-ins and things like that. So that was something that came in handy for Beckley to learn. But how I ended up actually meeting him was that back in the early 80s, I was working for a television station in Dayton, Ohio, and which Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, is right next door to Dayton. And the National Aerospace Museum there at Wright-Patterson was putting out a UFO exhibit, and J. Allen Hynek came to the museum to give a speech about this exhibit, Project Blue Book, and that sort of thing. And just as a side note, when I went there with my camera to do a report on this exhibit and to interview Hynek, I'm expecting a room that, had, pictures and books and exhibits all over the place. No, it was like this little pedestal with a small plexiglass cover that had like an old copy of Project Blue Book and then a couple of other items. That was the exhibit that the Air Force was putting out.
Times have changed, haven't they?
Yes, they have. So I interviewed Hynek, and by that time, Hynek was getting away from the extraterrestrial hypothesis of UFOs. I mean, he was talking about the possibility that we could be dealing with interdimensional craft or some other paranormal types of aspects of the whole UFO phenomena. So, like I said, this was the early 1980s, and this was hot stuff.
And so I've got to ask you, and sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, that would also kind of coincide with what Jacques Vallée, his mindset, and they were both good friends as well, so.
Right. Well, and you know that still at that time, people like Jacques Vallée and John Keel and, some of the others who were attempting to push past this mindset on the extraterrestrial theory of UFOs and look at this, scads and scads of evidence that seem to be pointing in all kinds of different directions, and they weren't getting a lot of acceptance from other investigators, and certainly not from the scientific community. I mean, the scientific community, wouldn't even consider the idea that UFOs could be extraterrestrials. Forget about suggesting that there could be some other, a multiverse, other dimensional paranormal aspect of the UFO phenomena. I mean, that really was out there in woo-woo land. So yeah, and then to have somebody then like J. Allen Hynek, come forward and say, I've been, looking at some of these other ideas, and I think they're pretty compelling. So what happened then was that I was able to get my story up on the CBS satellite feed, which at that time, this was like a continuous loop of stories that was put up by CBS on their satellite, their C-band satellite, that other stations could pick up and use on their own news broadcast. I mean, not only the world, world events, breaking news, things like that was going on. But then other stations could put up stories that were going on in their communities for anybody else to take. A CBS station in New York must have ran my story because Tim Beckley managed to track me down. He called me up and wanted a VHS copy of the story. And a transcript if I could provide one, and that's how we first met, and so then we corresponded back and forth for a while, because at that point I wasn't doing as much writing along the UFO paranormal field. First of all, because I hated typewriter. years. Yeah, even though the one thing in high school that I think that I came away with that has helped me in my career and throughout my life was being able to learn how to properly type. You know?
That would have been good. I missed that day in school. Maybe many.
And I ended up being good at it. Except, at our high school, all they had were manual typewriters. They maybe had one or two electric typewriters. You never got to use those. It was just manual typewriters. I mean, you really had to hit those keys hard in order to make it an imprint. And when I went to college, my first semester, you had to repeat your typing class, and they had electric typewriters, and it took me a while to get used to, because I'd be hammering away at this electric typewriter, and the paper would just shoot out in all different directions. But it wasn't really until they invented word processors that I started to really get back into writing again. I had done some writing when I was in college for some of the UFO magazines that were around at the time, the Saga UFO Report, True magazine had quarterly UFO magazines, places like that if you were lucky, they would actually pay you the money that they had promised you. But it wasn't until Tim Beckley decided that he was going to publish UFO Universe, which was going to be like a slick cover a magazine, and he got a hold of me and wanted to know if I had some articles that I could contribute for the early issues, and as well if he could send me articles by other people that could use some punching up, that sort of thing, and that's really how we got started, writing and publishing together and doing things like that. Oh my gosh. Oh yes, even more so, even more so. I mean, I wish that I had been old enough to have known him especially in the 70s, because
God.
from what people had told me, I mean he was a character. He liked his clothes.
Where did he
liked
out?
people.
Like Studio 54? Was he like? I mean, I can picture him like just, Mr. Disco.
Well, yeah, I don't know if he actually, I do know that I guess that that he went to places like what is this? I'm not going to say this right. CB3B,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's right on the tip of my tongue, but I think people know what I'm talking about. Some of these smaller music venues in Manhattan that a lot of the bands that then later would go on and make really major names for themselves got their starts, and that were Tim was really big into music. And so, I mean, he was at a lot of these places and got to know, a lot of these musicians and bands in their early days. And he could always manage to get himself backstage at these venues and meet these people because, he was the type of person that everybody disliked automatically. And he always liked to say how there was one situation where he wanted to get backstage at this one venue and it was being guarded by a Hell's Angel. But Tim managed to find something that the two of them had in common, and this guy is like, "Hey, you want to go backstage? Go ahead," and Tim said that he remained friends with this guy for a long time, and because a lot of these people also had an interest in the occult, the paranormal, and UFOs. I mean, that was a big commonality.
Well, I bet he probably hung out with
people.
Deborah Harry, and Blondie back in the day. I can picture that.
Yep. Yeah. Well, Dr. John.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Dr. John would because Tim had an occult center located at a building there in Manhattan that they would have meetings all the time, just to talk and to do stuff. I mean, there'd be people who would come and do read fortunes, and they would discuss witchcraft and things like that, and a lot of these people were also writers for various, especially rock and roll magazines, Cream and Rolling Stones and things like that. So I mean, Tim was really involved in all of this, and as well, Tim was also involved in putting out magazines on these subjects, especially like I said in the 70s on about the music scene. So these publishers, magazine publishers, knew that if they hired Tim, that Tim could quickly put out a magazine. A lot of times these magazines were just one-shot publications, but that for not a lot of money, Tim would put out a very quality magazine with good articles, good photographs, and they would always be profitable. And one of his favorite ones that he put out was, gosh, what was it called exactly? Something like something along the lines of natural disasters, natural and man-made disasters magazine, that sort of thing, and it ran for quite a while, and what Tim had managed to do is that he had managed to get a hold of this like a huge a photograph file from the Red Cross for just practically nothing. And I mean, it was just full of copyright-free photographs of natural disasters, train wrecks, just you name it. And that's what he would use in this magazine. Would be these absolutely fantastic photographs, and then he'd have these really good articles about recent events and that sort of thing. But that was the kind of stuff that he enjoyed doing, and in the process, he was just having a lot of fun, and would just, I mean, he loved to dress, I don't want to say outrageously, but
flamboyant.
I mean,
he was pretty flamboyant.
Yeah, he was. Well, he liked colorful clothes and things like that, and always would dress, always dressed up, and the ladies just loved him. I mean, he was very, very much a ladies' man, and he even admitted that he was this short, chubby little what, but he had the gift of gab and just had that great personality, and I mean he never ever failed to have, if not one, several, women with him.
Oh, mama!
Yeah, and
Well,
one of his best girlfriends, and somebody that he really loved a lot was a wrestler by the name of Susanna Miller, Lady Susanna Miller, and she was she was a wrestler before they became, I don't know, what would you call it, like a federation, the World Wrestling Federation.
Mm-hmm.
She was along the line, wrestled with these groups that had people like Dick the Bruiser and people like that, back in the late '60s and into the '70s. And I mean, she was his favorite person, and she passed away about 10 years ago. And that just that hurt him a lot. Even though that she lived in Florida and he lived in Manhattan, they always stayed in contact. Any time that he was in Florida, he always still managed to make time to visit her.
I mean, I think, that has got to be hard. And I think I can picture him with, surrounded by the ladies and having this big entourage and hanging out backstage at different nightclubs and getting in back when that music scene back in the 70s in New York was just off the chart. I mean, that is so cool. And so
it really was. It really was. And so many of these people had their own UFO experiences that he was able to get the information and record it down. And I mean, he released his UFOs Among the Stars, which is it's just full of all of these different accounts from celebrities and their UFO and paranormal experiences as well.
God, how fun! How incredible is that? And so, I mean, did he? I mean, he had experiences as a child, and then can you tell us a little bit about his personal experiences?
Well, a couple of things that even before he was born, he would tell the story about his grandfather on his father's side that had a farm in Kentucky, that had an experience one night where out behind the barn he saw a headless horseman, just pretty much like from the story. He said this guy come running up. It was like at dusk, and all of a sudden this guy come riding up towards him on this horse, and the person on back of the horse didn't have a head, and
that's never good. That's, nope.
But apparently, it just as it got closer and closer, it just slowly faded away.
Wow!
And apparently, there had been stories in that community that there was that other people had seen, a ghost of supposedly was a Southern soldier from the Civil War. Who had been killed in that area, and that was his ghost still floating around. Tim would also tell the story about how one time, and he said him and his sister were pretty young at the time. They were with their parents, and they were driving from New Jersey to Kentucky to visit his dad's family, and somewhere along the lines of Eastern Kentucky, where it's still pretty mountainous, I guess the weather had moved in. It was dark. It was rainy, foggy, and they got lost and didn't know where they were. So their dad decided that he was just going to pull off at the side of the road and wait till morning, so they could see where the heck they were. Of course, this was before cell phones and GPS. All you had, was the map in your glove compartment.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess then the next morning when the sun rose, that his dad had, if they had gone another foot, the car would have gone off a cliff. That's how close they were.
You know what?
So,
I think I remember him telling me that a long time ago when I interviewed him, and I've got it. I'm gonna find that interview and then play a portion of that in the next, upcoming when we do our video thing that we're gonna do. Because, to hear that story, that's very profound.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's, one of these situations that, I'm sure that a lot of us have been into, if you had just, if you had taken one step further, you would have tumbled off the cliff, or if you had left home, a minute earlier, you would have gotten hit by a train, that sort of thing. That's one of these that's one of those stories that I've had a lot of people tell me as well. These, oh my God, if I had done this when I wanted to, I would be dead now. Right. Those types of stories.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, how incredible! Let's talk a little bit, because we're going to go to break in a few minutes, but talk a little bit more about some of the occult meetings that he had. Because if I could have been a fly on the wall, that would have been a good time right there.
Yeah. Well, these meetings, it was through these meetings that he got to meet a lot of these, famous people, and people who ended up being friends for the rest of his life. Mark Bringerhoff, who was on the same YouTube show that I was on last night, met Tim at one of these meetings. John Keel, the late writer John Keel, would go to these meetings as well. In fact, they had a separate thing called the the Manhattan Fortean Society. That would discuss, all kinds of different things outside of, occult, witchcraft, fortune telling, and things like that. But from the way, Tim tells it, and of course, unfortunately, I missed out on all that stuff. I was too young, and was living in central Indiana at the time.
Oh, that could have been a hindrance for sure.
Yeah, my parents never would have allowed me to go to something like that. But these things were a lot like a social club almost. I mean, it was people getting together with these the same kind of interest. Like I said before, you had a lot of people who would do tarot card readings, or maybe a seance, or cast some spells. Some people would bring, crystals or other trinkets that they'd want to sell. There would be speakers who would come in and give lectures. Tim often would give lectures on his own, but I think a lot of times, he would have the floor open to other people who would maybe trying to push a book, or push their own types of services. And this was, in the early to mid 70s. There was this big boom in interest in the occult. Occult, witchcraft, things like that. I mean, you look, and there are a lot of books, paperback books especially, that were being published at that time. And so, you had these places like the Manhattan Occult Society, opening up, and people made lifelong friendships, and a lot of careers also got started at places like this. Carol Rodriguez, who eventually became Tim's lifelong friend and work partner. She was the person who worked with Tim in his office, helping get the books out, get them packaged and sold, and sent to the post office and things like that. I mean, she she came to one of these meetings one time because somebody was going to be talking about the Ashtar command, in the whole UFO field, and that's how they met. So I mean, it was just this wonderful time in history where you had this great combination, not only of interest in the occult and the paranormal, but also in the newly emerging rock and roll scene that was taking place in the 70s and early 80s.
Oh my God, that would have been so cool. I mean, I can just picture myself now, but nope, it was a little. It's wrong state and wrong time frame, but that's okay.
Yep. I know. Same with me.
Fascinating. Wow. And I'm so excited to learn more because I've got, in front of me, I've got a couple copies of Conspiracy Journal and then another copy of, and you can hear my papers flying everywhere, UFO Review, the 3rd issue. And it says, like on the cover, it's eerie voice from outer space interrupts TV broadcast. And then, just that in a shocking truth, last year over 50,000 people vanished without a trace. How many people were taken on board UFOs? And so, it's just like, oh my gosh, it's so cool to, read all of these things. And I love that part of history. And it is really interesting to see how some of these things that were written really shaped the narrative for future generations, and I'm excited to hear more because, as we know, there was yet another side to your friend. And we're going to talk about that when we get back because he talked about that on the last show I did with him, and I love it. He was a colorful, wonderful, very kind man. And I know you will miss him, and I will miss him, and wish that I could have known him half as good as you. But thank you for being here. We're going to take a quick break. I am Erica Lukes. You can go to UFOclassified.com to pledge your support for the show because, as some of you know, I would hope most of you listening, I really am promoting the truth, and it's not easy. I have taken a lot of hits for speaking my mind and learning hard lessons, but we are in this together, and now more than ever we need to make sure we're getting good information and we're not falling into the same traps that other generations have fallen into. And so if we do that, then we can move forward in a positive direction. So I know I'm Don Quixote, but I'm just telling you. So anyway, I'm going to be back with Tim Swartz. We will be back in about 3 minutes. Welcome back to UFO Classified. This is the second half of, the best UFO show on the planet. I'm just throwing that one out there to make myself feel better. But anyway, if you want to go support UFO Classified, go to ufoclassified.com. I want to thank all of the people that I see in chat that help keep this show on the air. Not only that, but help the archiving process. There is so much to do. I mentioned at the opening of the show that I have got a couple people behind the scenes that are going to help me come to the video world. So look out, people. You are going to be in trouble. And for my Patreons, I have a very special interview that will be coming out in the next few days with Nick Pope. And let me tell you, this is good. And this is just for the people that help support the show. So I want to thank you very much for all of that. So on that note, I'm here with Tim Swartz, who has just lost a very dear friend. Tim has been in the UFO game for a long, long time. And Tim Beckley was such a larger-than-life human being. But what a life. And 73 just seems way too young to pass away. And I'm so sorry. But tell us a little bit about your radio show. Because you guys did that for how many years?
We started exploring the bizarre in 2015. But actually we had done some shows. I used to have a show on another network with Michael Mott, and now that I'm trying to remember its name, I can't remember its name. Sorry, Mike.
Well, it happens.
What was the name of that show? I was like,
sounds like a guy I dated once.
And all I can think of is Exploring the Bizarre, which was, the show that we were doing on KCOR. But while we were doing that show, we would have Tim Beckley on, naturally, several times as a guest, and then there were a few times when Mike couldn't do the show, so I would bring Tim on to be a co-host with me, and we had such a great time doing that. I mean, we wouldn't even have to have a guest. And in the same way when we did Exploring the Bizarre, I mean, there'd be sometimes when the guests would bail on us, and so we would just talk and discuss things for 2 hours, and that was so much fun. I mean, we could just Tim was a treasure trove. His memory about incidents and the names of people and when they happen. Oh my God, I wish I had that type of memory when it comes to remember like the minutia and the names and stuff of these UFO incidents. But Tim could just, he just would just spew them out. So the guy who owned this network, he came to Beckley and said, "Hey, why don't you just do a show of your own?" So for a while, Tim Beckley had a show on the same network. Since I was already doing another show, Tim got another guest or another host who was a friend of his, but somewhere along the lines he had a falling out, with the guy who owned the network.
Oh dear. Yeah.
Tim, greatest guy in the world, but if you honked him off, then he had that New York.
If you honked him off, I have never heard that saying before. I'm using it. Yes.
Yeah, well, trying to keep it, kind of family friendly.
Wow, that was. Thank you for new material.
But yeah, I mean, if you got him on his wrong side, then he would have let you know. I mean, there was no uncertain terms. He would let you know how he felt. So around the time that he lost that gig, Mike Mott then could no longer do the show that we were doing. He got a teaching job and would have to get up early in the morning. So for some reason, he didn't want to stay up, from like midnight to 2 o'clock to do our show. He had to get up early to go teach. I love Mike Mott, by the way. He great writer, and he was a great co-host with me. But so Tim was approached by Tina Marie, who was just starting her digital radio network, KCOR, and we had been on her show, Restricted Airspace, a couple times, and she came to us and said, "Hey, I'm starting this new network. Would you be interested in doing a show?" So that's how we started doing Exploring the Bizarre. Like I said, it was 2015 when we started, and with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 weeks a year, we would do probably 50 shows a year.
Yeah.
For all that time. So that was a bunch of shows. Somebody asked me, and I should have wrote this down and got the number down. How many shows that we probably did with KCOR, and it's like, boy, I couldn't even begin to tell you. Trying to estimate, 50 shows a year for 6 years, 7 years.
Yeah, exactly. That's about how long I've been, doing that too. And yeah, it's just amazing. But I can't think of a better place that I would rather be, like on Friday night. And I'm sure it's same for you both, because it's just like you have this group of people, and they're in there interacting, and it's just a real fun kind of thing. So I love it.
And that was the thing, Tim, when we started doing these shows, because he had been on the other side of the microphone for all these years. He was the one that was being interviewed, and he used to do a radio talk show called the Long John Nebel Show.
Yes.
Which was very hot back in the 60s. And I mean, Tim was a very young guy. I mean, he was still a teenager when he started coming on the Long John Nebel Show. And Long John Nebel, I mean, that was the coast to coast of that era. This was the guy who started, doing these late night talk radio shows, bringing in, the UFO contactees, people like that. And it was heard out of Manhattan. It was, I think it was WOR, which was a clear channel AM station. Now, for those of you who don't know, a clear channel station was 50,000 watts. And for an AM station at 50,000 watt, the signal can propagate practically forever. So you could hear WOR up and down the East Coast. You could probably hear it in Indiana. Indiana had its own clear channel station in Fort Wayne, but that's so Tim always liked to talk about how he would make numerous appearances on the Long John Nebel Show, and this was like an all night type of show. And he said that, and you'd have to go to the studio. None of this calling on Skype or on the telephone. No, you had to actually physically be in the studio to do this show. So he said that after all these years of being the one being the interview, that it was nice to be on the other side of the microphone and interview other people and hear their stories. But Tim being Tim, not only did he like to hear these other stories, but then it gave him the opportunity to tell his stories again.
That's incredible. And John, I mean, Long John Nebel had quite a colorful, just like Tim, very interesting history, and was kind of one of the backbones for the conspiracy angle to all of these things, and really putting the voodoo, all of these things, ghosts and UFOs into the mainstream. And he was also married to Candy Jones.
Candy Jones, right, the possible MK Ultra spy. Candy Jones, and and Tim has talked about Candy because Candy was the one who took over Long John's show after he passed away from cancer, and Tim would say that Candy oftentimes would give him a ride after the show back to his apartment. She had a car and a driver, and so but Tim. Even though there was even a book written about the Candy's possible MJ-12, not MJ-12, MK Ultra experiences. Yeah. Tim said that he's not sure whether or not that actually happened, as was written up, in the book about her, because he said that she never discussed it with him, and Tim being Tim, he was the type of guy that could, he could get information out of anybody freely. Anybody would talk to Tim for just a few minutes, and they'd be telling him their life story. So he, and that's the way that Tim was. He was very accepting of everybody's stories. He loved the contactees. He liked the weirdies and the crazies, as he would call them, the colorful personalities, in this field, because they were interesting. There was the UFO barber, as he was referred to, who was very predominant in Manhattan, especially in the late 60s.
God, that sounds like a bad horror movie.
Well, this was a guy. He was a barber, and he claimed that he was getting telepathic contacts from the space aliens, and there's pictures of him. If you go to Google, you probably find him of this guy who had this really bizarre looking headdress that he had made, which was like a band that went around his head, and then like a tube that came out of the front and the back. That was what I guess that he could use to project his telepathic powers and things like that. 'Cause there's some pictures of him like standing in front of the UN, and he's like trying to project the healing, loving vibes from the space alien.
I mean, that's nice. I mean, I wonder do you think it was good for business?
For whose business?
Well, I mean, when you've got kind of something like that, you never know. I don't know. Wow.
Yeah, but those are the people that Tim especially loved in the UFO field, and I think that because of that kind of put Tim on a lot of other UFO researchers and investigators' crap list. Because they felt that he wasn't taking the subject seriously enough, and that he was writing about aspects of the phenomena that were considered just too far out there, too weird, that you had to again, like I said before, you had to stick with the facts. It was just dates, times, witnesses, that sort of thing, and that and you well know that it wasn't really until the 1970s that UFO researchers were really even starting to accept reports about UFO occupants being seen, coming out of these crafts. I mean, and forget about abductions and experiencers and things like that. So Tim was very much an early pioneer in putting the stories out there from some of these more fringe elements in the UFO field. So and he always kept that philosophy all of his life when it came to his publishing, is that these were stories that needed to be heard. Sure, they may be, they may sound crazy, they may be crazy, but they're still an important aspect of all of this. And if you just go and say, "No, this is just too crazy," throw it out, then again, you're losing something. You're losing a flavor in all of this. Whether or not 100 years from now down the road, it's going to make that big of a difference, who knows? But for now, I think that all of this stuff is extremely important to be known, to be categorized, and for people to remember. As you well know, Erica, right now you have a lot of these new people coming up interested in UFOs and wanting to do investigations and research, but they don't have a lot of interest in the history of the subject, what happened in the past. And you're never going to be able to get a clear idea of what's going on now unless you know what has happened in the past. And that includes all of it.
Yes.
Even the stuff that you think is just too far out there. You're not. You can't make that judgment. Well, I suppose you can make that judgment call, but you're going to miss out on a lot.
Right, absolutely. And I think it is interesting because I have talked to, somebody that is very close to me, and they're talking about different collections that have been donated, different archives that have been donated, and one in particular to a place in New Mexico where they made the decision to throw out, or get rid of a portion of that investigator's research, and body of work. And it's like, how can you do that? Because this is a whole person. All of this needs to be kept there. So, like you said, you can learn from history and things, and it's just a real disservice to do that.
It really is, because it's like I said in the first segment of your program. You're letting your own personal bias get in the way by tossing out this person's stuff because you don't agree. You don't agree with it. It's like these people that I see at times, fighting, say, like the Bigfoot, Sasquatch researchers fighting with the UFO researchers. The Bigfoot researchers saying, "Oh, UFOs, that's crazy stuff," but here's this 12-foot hairy guy running around in the woods. That's true.
I mean,
and then you got the people on the UFO side saying, yeah, extraterrestrials coming from other planets, but 12-foot hairy guys running around in the woods, that's nuts.
Well, what about the tall Nordics? I mean, let's talk about the tall Nordics, because there was, in fact, in a couple of these, in conspiracy journals specifically, I mean, there's a lot of there are articles about the neo-Nazis and about the benevolent space brothers who are blonde-haired and blue-eyed and things. I mean, what did Tim think about all of that?
The early contactee movement that started in the late 40s and the early 50s, you had people like George Adamski and Howard Menger. Allegedly the extraterrestrials that they came into contact with were almost inevitably described as tall, Nordic-looking humanoids. A lot of them had androgynous features, long hair, very angelic looking in appearance, and even though you don't see it written about in a lot of the UFO literature, there have been cases where darker skinned humanoids were seen as well. So it wasn't just all entirely, like this Aryan master race that some of the more I suppose right-wing conspiratorial UFO groups have it that outer space is filled with nothing more than the tall white humanoids. But this was an aspect that, I mean, even today there are reports of people seeing these types of humanoids associated with UFOs. Now, of course, the little big-eyed grays seems to have taken over the whole experience, but you'll still see every once in a while this filtering down, especially people who experiencers who have been taken somewhere, either on board or a craft or someplace else. They'll see a tall, a white humanoid that seems to be, at least they get the impression that this is the leader of the group, which who knows whether or not that is true, or if it's just that subconscious bias where you see something that looks very much almost like an angel, or preconceived notions of an angel that and then like these little definitely alien looking guys running around. You have this built-in biases as well. This angelic looking being is the boss. Everything else is they're the servants. Right. So and this was an aspect that Tim always found interesting, in the phenomena. But like myself, we quite a while ago had kind of started leaning away from the extraterrestrial hypothesis as being the only explanation, and looking into all kinds of different evidence that comes out every year. And Tim, I mean, he very much liked the idea that at least some aspects of the UFO phenomena could be man-made craft that was developed at least as far back as during World War II by Nazi Germany, and possibly even further back than that. That was then later incorporated by Nazi scientists, and Tim's favorite story is that whatever it was that crashed at Roswell in 1947 probably wasn't an extraterrestrial, but could have been a Nazi developed flying saucer, either by Germans who had run off and hidden someplace, say like in South America, or something that had been captured by the United States military and was being tested at the time.
Well, and that is, all of that history is just so colorful and convoluted. It's quite interesting. But did he, throughout his journey in this subject, the paranormal and the world of UFOs, I mean, what were some things that unsettled him?
I think, okay, something that really unsettled him, and this was, this happened, within the last 10 years or so, was, because one of the things that we like to write about, and we're featured in a number of our books and magazine articles, were conspiracy theories. Now, when I say conspiracy theories, I'm talking about things like government-sponsored mind control, secret black project aircraft, things like that. Never political. We never approached the political aspect of conspiracy theories, because most of them, for us, just sounded too bizarre and far-fetched. And I think that, and I have to agree with him, that within the last 10 years, with conspiracy theories being co-opted, so to speak, by partisan politics here in the United States. Well, not just in the United States. Some of these groups have become worldwide, and it really left a bad taste in Tim's mouth with this stuff, because then, when somebody would talk about conspiracy theory, they no longer were talking about the MK Ultra or maybe the government radiation experiments on prisoners that took place in the 40s and 50s. Now they're talking about these hidden cabooses of pedophilic elites, who had taken over the deep states and were turning the country into God knows what. And we would see these things that were being now talked about on the news, and we were just like, oh my God, what has happened? It's no longer. And we would say, it's no longer this fun stuff that we used to talk and write about. Now it's really become dark and just really, really extreme and out there. And for us to say extreme and out there, then yeah, it really has to be extreme and out there, because I mean, we would examine all kinds of just really bizarre conspiracy theories, but some of this stuff that they talk about now it's just like, oh, it's sad, and that's the way that Tim felt. I mean, and we the little catalog newsletter that he'd put out a couple times a year. It was called Conspiracy Journal Bizarre. Okay, bizarre as in strange, and then bizarre as like a store. Well, he finally dropped Conspiracy Journal because so many people were thinking that it was political. It was going to be political, and in fact, over the last couple of years, we could no longer post things on Facebook using Conspiracy Journal because we'd put out a weekly email newsletter, and for the longest time, when that newsletter would go up online every week, we'd put it on the link on Facebook. Well, after a while, a couple of years ago, Facebook said, no, you can't do that anymore because there's the word conspiracy in it. Yeah.
Huh.
So that's I think that was one of the main things, over the last few years of his life that I think really just really rankled him, and I don't blame him.
Right. No, I don't blame him either. And I've done a lot of shows on that very thing because it is sad how we see the subject kind of hijacked by some of these people with ideas along those lines, and it just muddies the water and is not good. But what were things like? What was one of the shining achievements for him? What was, like, if you could think of one case or one story that he broke and investigated and loved, what would that be?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh! There was one story that he particularly loved because he got to know the guy who had this experience, and Tim really felt that this guy had an authentic experience, and it was just a fantastic story with some really good evidence. And this was a guy by the name of Carl Higgins. And okay, and then of course there was also the just backtrack just really quick here. There was the farmer in Iowa who was given the pancakes by the little man in a flying saucer that hovered above his field.
Yeah, I think Barry Greenwood actually has a piece of the pancake.
Yes, probably does. And according to Tim, I guess the Air Force had it on display for a while at the cafeteria at the Aerospace Museum there in Dayton, but I never saw it there. So they must have taken it away by the time I got there.
Cafeteria. That's
yeah. But yeah, he loved that story. But he also loved the story of Carl Higgins. Now, Carl Higgins was a hunter who was out one day. He was hunting for elk. And he had come across the herd, and he had actually fired a shot at one elk in particular, and this guy said that at that very moment time seemed to slow down, and he said that he could actually see the bullet come out of his rifle, go about 10 feet in front of him, and he said it was like it hit this invisible wall, and the bullet fell down, and he was then approached by this really bizarre looking being that had a white face and odd hair that seemed to be spiked almost, like it stood on end, and this being escorted him to a craft. It wasn't like a flying saucer. It was more of a blunt cylinder, or almost a squared off type of vehicle. But he said that the vehicle was really small, and that this being touched his belt, and the two of them shrunk down and got on board with the craft, and also on the craft, this being had, I guess, had captured and immobilized several elk from the herd that Carl was trying to hunt. And he was taken apparently to a different location off planet. He was never sure if he was on board a giant craft or actually went to a different planet. He was subsequently brought back again and released. And he was extremely disoriented when he was released. He managed to drag himself back to his truck, and of course, you have to remember, like he was out in the woods somewhere, quite a ways from home, had been missing for a number of hours. His wife was worried sick. He discovered, though, that his truck had been lifted off of the road and was now several yards away in a swampy area, and it had sunk down, up to the rims of his tire. So he wasn't able to get his truck out, and he managed to drag himself back home a number of miles, and he was very sick. Didn't do well for a number of days. They finally got his truck, out of this marsh. He managed to find, in fact, the bullet that he had fired at this elk, and it looked like that it had hit a wall. It was just compressed. It was almost, it was like just, a flattened bullet. And he suffered for a number of years from just unknown ailments, fatigue. He lost part of his hair for a while. I mean, he just really had a bad time of it. And Tim got to know him and his wife really well, and he felt that the story was just really compelling, and he could never really find any evidence on why not? I mean, Carl Higgins, he never sought publicity. He was very shy about this story, and his wife confirmed, everything that he said. She said, yeah, he had been missing for quite a while. When he finally came home without his truck. He looked like that he, had been, beat up and put up wet. Wow. And it was just a really amazing story. And that was one of Tim's favorites. He talked about that one quite a bit. And it's one that you don't hear about that case very often. But Tim, with a lot of these cases that he investigated, I mean, he went all out. I mean, he actually he went to their house and went to the location where he had this experience and got to know them and was friends with them for a number of years. So I mean, that's one of the things that we always like to emphasize to people is that if you're going to investigate a case like this, you really have to go all out and investigate the case. Right. I mean, yes. you can't just write down what time it happened and the color in the sky and that sort of thing. You really need to get to know the people involved.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's been one of the things that I've done, over the years. So you make that initial contact and then you keep checking in and you keep going back and you keep adding more because it's an evolving, story. And I think that is important. And I just want to say, about the case that you just mentioned, I actually, back in grade school, drew that event. So whatever that means, it means I guess I was a little strange from a young age, but that stuck out to me. And I have the picture of the alien in his little outfit, and he's zapping an ant who's on its back, saying "help." Oh God! Wow, it's a wonder I got a date in high school. Oh, Lord, Lordy. But so, tell us, he also, and I want to just mention this because I think this just it adds another layer to him. But he was in, the adult film, industry. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Well, and before anybody out there, just blows a vein in their head, he wasn't an actor, and he actually wrote and reported on the adult film industry. Though he actually at one point he produced his own adult film with the backing of the Dark Brothers, and it was called Driller, which was a kind of a spoof satire on Michael Jackson's video Thriller. And Tim actually managed to get the funds to have it filmed in 35 millimeter film,
Wow.
which this was at the crossroads of when the video was just starting to maybe take off in adult film production. Before that, things were being shot on film, usually 16 millimeter, that sort of thing. Tim managed to get the funds, and he insisted this was going to be shot using 35 millimeter, which that's the that was the standard for mainstream movies at the time, and it's the movie. And it's still available on DVD. I mean, you can look for it and find it somewhere. But I mean, the production values on this thing were fantastic. I mean, they went all out to do this. It's kind of a combination horror musical.
Oh my!
Kind
of Rocky Horror.
Kind of like. Yeah. It had dancing naked zombie.
Oh, mother!
That sort of thing. And the main character who they found this dancer who looked almost exactly like Michael Jackson.
Oh, sweet baby
Joseph.
How
they were able to produce this without being sued is beyond me. I suppose that maybe if anybody attempted to sue them, they could just say, well, it's satire and it's protected.
Wow.
But you had the main character. He would turn into a werewolf. That then he had a lower extremity that acted like a drill, so to speak.
Mother of hellfire! I need to bathe in holy water now. Now is good. Sweet, Mama Mia.
That's the name of the movie.
Okay, well, yeah, that very creative, I would say.
Yeah, very much so. But he was able to do this because for a number of years, he was like a film reviewer for Hustler magazine, and he was like an associate editor for several other glossy magazines that dealt with the adult film industry. So Tim being Tim, he got to know people. He got to know directors, producers, distributors, actresses, actors, that sort of thing. So I mean, he like every other thing that he was interested in, he got to know everybody, and everybody knew Tim. So one of the funny stories is that I don't know, it's maybe 5 or 6 years ago, somebody wrote a blog for whatever reason, and Tim had his haters. This person wrote this blog with this big revelation that Tim had been involved in the adult film industry, wrote articles and was produced movies and acted in movies and things like that, thinking that this was going to be some big hit piece on Beckley that would ruin his career, and always like, oh my God, Mr. UFO, he's like a porn hustler or something, and those of us who knew Tim, we just had to laugh. It was like, okay, this is like the worst kept secret in the world. If you think that this was some big revelation that was going to ruin his career, and that's what it ended up being. I suppose there might have been some people, who've been hiding under a rock all these years who didn't know this, who be like, oh, and faint. But for everybody else, we were just like, yeah, so.
Well, I mean, and you look at John Keel. Wasn't John Keel writing kind of, interesting novels before?
Yeah, well, back then, everybody did. Everybody who was a writer. I mean, they would have their favorite subject. If you wrote about UFOs or ghosts, or what have you, and then they'd make some money on the side, writing for these little paperback novels, like Greenleaf Publishing and some of these other, I mean they basically were just naughty books, very very little plot, just cover to cover sexual encounters. A lot of these people, if they were good at it, they could write out a book in a week, and they can get a couple $100 from the publishers, and which especially those of us who wrote for UFO magazines, a lot of times it's very difficult to get paid, and that was one of the great things about Tim Beckley. He always paid. I never once did Tim renege on a promise to pay. And I mean, I wrote for some very well known magazines over the years, and I tell you something. For a lot of them, trying to get paid would be like pulling teeth. It's like, oh my gosh, it's just a couple $100. Just pay me. But you never had to ask that for Tim. He always paid. If like you wrote a book or helped do a magazine for him, you'd always get copies for free. I mean, he was just always just the kindest soul when it came to that, and he never was greedy or a liar when it came to matters of money. And I mean, and if there was a time when, say, like he was a little bit low on funds, if he hadn't been paid by, say, like a distributor or something like that, then he'd say, hey, I can't pay you just yet, but as soon as I get something, you'll be one of the first, that I'll send you money to, and that was one of the most wonderful things about Tim. If you were there with him, I mean, he'd always take you out to dinner, always paid. He'd always buy the drinks. If you wanted to do that, he'd always manage to talk you out of it. No, let me take care of this. I'll take care of it. And he was just the kindest, most generous soul.
And so when you look back on your long friendship with him, what is your favorite memory of him?
Oh my gosh. Oh, gee.
I know that's a hard question. I'm sure there's so much, but
well, okay. One of the things that and this I always just found this humorous, but around 2000, there was a big upsurge in independent filmmakers coming out, making movies that would be direct to video releases. And Tim decided, because of his experience doing Driller, that maybe we should do this. I mean, he knew of my experience in television production, and he said, can we do this? Can we make some direct to videos movie? What do we need to do? So at around that time, digital video cameras were just coming out and being available for the prosumer market. Now rather than now the digital cameras, everything goes on to a chip. Then it was still being it was digital on tape. So I said, well, here's these cameras. Sony's putting out these cameras, prosumer cameras, that, they're not really expensive, and they actually will produce a broadcast quality image. And so we went and made 3 direct-to-video movies. I was the director on a couple of them. I edited all of them using some of the early computer digital software that was available at the time. And we just had such a great time making these movies. I'd fly to Manhattan. We had a limited budget and limited time, but Tim managed to gather these really fantastic actors and these great locations, and and we would shoot these movies and just cobble them together. And believe it or not, you can still find some of these movies, like on YouTube, like the buyer, the buyer rent sections, or Tubi, which is a streaming movie service. And one of them for the longest time was a big seller for whatever reason in Japan. One of the distributors that Tim had gotten at one point, he's like, I don't know what's going on, but they're flying off the shelves it's big in Japan.
Wow.
But one of my favorite memories was that we were filming. It was a vampire movie. And this would have been like a vampire movie that you would see on Cinemax after midnight. All right, it wasn't hardcore. It'd be
Right,
softcore stuff. And that was kind of my idea, because we had this horror element. And I said, well, these kind of movies seem to be doing really well if you have this combination of sex and horror. So let's try to go into that direction. So we were shooting in this location in Manhattan. It was called The Dungeon, and it was a little S&M club. And Tim knew the owner. And the owner agreed for a couple of nights not to open it, and we could shoot using their facilities. I mean, and when they said The Dungeon, I mean, that's what it looked like. I mean, it had, like these almost medieval torture devices there for that kind of crowd. And at one point, and again, now, we had a limited amount of time to get these scenes shot. All right. I had it all, I had it all listed out, what had to be shot, how long it would take, that sort of thing. Tim became fixated. He had gotten a hold of these giant bat wings that a person could, almost like a backpack, you could strap them on, and you could move like this lever, and they would unfurl outward. Great looking stuff.
What?
And he became obsessed with he wanted to get this shot of a girl coming out of the coffin, standing up and unfurling these bat wings. Well, it wasn't working. And he became and spent almost the entire night trying to get this shot. And finally at one point, because we each had a camera, and we were supposed to shoot the scenes from like different angles. Tim would have one angle and I would get the other. So then during the editing process, you could cut back and forth, and use that to hide, any mistakes or stuff like that. Of course, you'd also shoot B-roll before and after that you could use to shift the scenes back and forth. So at one point, I finally had to say, okay, Tim, I'm going to go and shoot all of the other scenes that we were supposed to shoot tonight while you try to get this figure out. And so, I took the people who, were supposed to be doing these other scenes to, different locations in this building to get these scenes while Tim tried to get this one scene perfected. And I think, in the final movie, I think it probably was like about a 5-second shot. But he spent like maybe 8 hours trying to perfect this one shot. But that's the way that Tim was. He would get this idea in his head, and it would be difficult to shake him from it until he either got it or he just got so frustrated that he would stop. But rarely would he get so frustrated that he would stop. He would just keep at it till it was done to his liking.
And so, so can we see this anywhere?
Oh, sure. Well, the movie I was just talking about, it's called the subtitle is called The Curse of Ed Wood. The full title is called Barely Legal Lesbian Vampires.
Mamma mia. Hello, Dolly. Okay.
and of course, we came up with these titles, so they stand out themselves.
How did you come up with those titles? Was it after a good night of drinking, or?
Well, at that time, that title specifically, at that time, there were a number of adult-oriented magazines that had and some videos as well from some company that started with barely legal such and such, barely legal housewives, barely legal, naughty cops, that sort of thing. So it was my idea. I said, well, how about barely legal lesbian vampires? That's good. Why not? And then later we put on the title The Curse of Ed Wood because Tim did a couple of scenes where he was playing his Mr. Creepo character.
Oh God.
And he was in a cemetery, with his cape and and all of that, and he was talking to a gravestone that supposedly was the grave of Ed Wood, the movie director, the schlocky movie director, and telling him how much trouble that he's having making this movie, and that Ed Wood needs to come out of the grave and help us. So that's where the subtitle, The Curse of Ed Wood. So I use The Curse of Ed Wood a lot of times so as not to, shock those who are easily shockable.
That's a good way to work them into it. Either way.
And then the other one was called Sandy Hook Lingerie Party Massacre, and that one was more of along the lines of a like a cut 'em up slasher movie. That were, those like Friday the 13th or Halloween, that along those lines. And then the last one we did was called Skin Eating Jungle Vampires. And that's we had a lot of fun with that one. Tim actually, him and he and another a friend of his had taken a vacation to Costa Rica and shot all kinds of video there. And then later we took that video and shot other scenes at various locations around New Jersey to make it, to combine the two to make it look like that everything was shot in Costa Rica. And, Tim played like this, like a space alien who had crashed into the Costa Rican volcano a million years ago with his what would you call them? his girls. They were the skin eating jungle vampires, and who roamed around in the jungle kidnapping and killing people and things like
Oh.
that. But there's like a great scene at the end as the volcano's exploding, where Tim is being struck continuously in the face with giant rocks as the volcano blows up and falls on top of them all. So,
Oh my God! Wow.
Just a lot of fun and fun to watch. Though a lot of people watch it and it's like, those are the worst movies we've ever seen. And it's like, yeah, I mean, they're never gonna win an Oscar, but
But how
you
much
don't
fun.
you don't watch them for that.
I mean, that is.
They're
Dang.
Yep, they're fun to produce, fun to watch.
Well, and what wonderful memories, and that just makes me smile because I can see him, doing that and working with the bat wings and trying to, just with his girls. And just an incredible, colorful person, and how lucky you are and how lucky he was, to have you as a friend. So, then that's just amazing. And I have to ask you, because I got a really great question from one of my people in chat, Peter, who wanted to know what Tim thought about death, and did he think that there was anything beyond?
He did. Tim was very, very spiritual. He was raised a Christian, but he didn't really follow any like major organized type of religion. But he did believe that there was an afterlife. That he didn't think that you would die and then that would be it. And he had talked about he hoped that that maybe he would get a chance to ride that mothership after he passed away. And I hope that's the case.
I hope so too. And I, again, thank you so much for coming on the show and just sharing those little experiences. And I want to have you, on again and again to learn more about everything that you've contributed and found out in your process. But then just to hear those stories and great. So, what you just said had nothing to do with UFOs, but this is a person who it's, I love that. You have to, I don't know. I'm very envious that you had those experiences. That's really cool.
Oh yeah. We had a lot of fun, and I'm definitely going to miss that.
Well, I look forward to talking to you. And so I told you that I'm going to be calling you, and then you can give me some lessons, teach me some things, and share your stories with me. And I know I'm not Tim, but, we'll give it a try. We can create new adventures here.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure, Eric. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I want to just where can people, if they want to find you, where would be a good place to reach you or learn more about you?
Well, right now, there's still the Conspiracy Journal website, and it's conspiracyjournal.com. Keep that up and running. All of my books, all of Tim's books can be found at amazon.com. Just type his name in, my name, Sean Castile. All of our books will pop up, and there's a ton of them. We managed to put out a lot of books, but those are probably the best two places that you can find us.
Oh, that's wonderful, and thank you so much. And I hope you stay healthy, and I look forward to talking to you. I'll give you a buzz, and I want to just say thank you to everybody in chat. Peter just said, Tim Beckley, a great human being. You knew that, and thank you for sharing a little piece of what you experienced with him. That's really, really cool. Thank you very much.
Hey, my pleasure. I enjoyed it, and I hope your audience enjoyed it as well.
They did, absolutely. And I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm Erica Lukes with a wonderful night with Tim Swartz and remembering Tim Beckley and the legacy that he will leave. Please go to ericalukes.com or ufoclassified.com to find out more about the show, to pledge your support. And I do have some really, really cool stuff coming up. So look forward to videos. I'm busting a move. I know I'm like Grandma Moses a little behind the scenes, but, things happen. So thank you very much, you guys. Stay safe. Thank you, Northern UFOs, and all of my friends out there. I love you guys. Friday nights are the best. Stay safe.
so my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am. My skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course, the tinfoil hat guy's gonna see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
We want to put it to use to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking for military-type people, because in the military, you work with whatever you got, no matter what the situation is, and you just kind of adapt and overcome.
What are you going to do with all this? You can't even take care of your own files and get them put into the current system, but yet you want to go collect other people's things. So what are you going to do with it? Who are you giving all this to?
It just really struck me about how the common thread seemed to be deception, but deception of a human nature. So that's what I started thinking, who would these folks be? I mean, then I started thinking about the intelligence agencies, what role they could play, and what would be their motivations for getting involved in ufology.
I'm not saying that because the gimbal is not a rotating flying saucer, that means that all the UFOs are false. Not at all. All I'm doing is I'm looking at this one case, these individual cases, and seeing if there's an explanation for those. So try to, if I could ask people out there listening, don't think that I'm trying to attack your entire beliefs about these things.
Nice to be in orbit.